Hi everyone, lovely to see you guys. Okay, settle down please. We're just gonna do the roll call. Amy, Tim, Fran, Matt, Dylan, Bree, Ashley, Sarah, Amy, yep, Tom, Matthew, Reese. Okay, that's everyone. Let's get started. So today we're gonna be continuing on the topic of ancient China, which we have been doing in the last few weeks. And we're just moving on now to one significant individual. So we're going to be doing this for the next week or two. Let's start off with this. Does this look familiar to anyone? Yep, someplace on Earth. Yep. Okay. Anyone that said it was the Great Wall, you got it. That's great. So why did we start with the Great Wall? It's a pretty famous it's a pretty famous historical site, right? It seems that most of you have at least heard of it or know what it is. And the reason that we are going to talk about it is because this guy, Qin Shi Huang, is the one that made it all happen. So Qin Shi Huang was the first emperor of China. He had done a lot of things in his lifetime, but one of his biggest achievements was completing the Great Wall, on top of unifying China. So he did a bunch of stuff. He became king of the Qin state when he was 13 years old. He later on started declaring war to the neighboring states, and he conquered them all and made them into one unified China for the first time in history. And as soon as he did that, he started building, well, the wall was already started before his reign, but he was the one that was able to finish it. So some basic facts about him. He was born in 259 BC. His father died when he was young, so he was crowned the king of Qin dynasty. Can anyone guess how old he was when this happened, when he was crowned the king? Anyone? 80 years old? Not quite. 30, 40? Okay, so he was actually 13 years old, pretty much the same age as a lot of you guys here. That's pretty crazy. So just imagine going home tomorrow and finding out that you have to become the emperor of a country. Here is a brief timeline, important events in his life. So Qin Shi Huang had a pretty eventful life. He had a lot of power and authority, but he was also pretty ruthless. So one of the things he's most famous for, as I said, was unifying China for the first time. Before this happened, China was divided into different kingdoms and territories. And as a young king, Qin already had the ambition of unifying China into one country. So yeah, to do this, he fought a lot of wars and conquered a lot of territories. He also built a lot of infrastructure, like roads and canals, to make it easier to travel and commute across the country. He also standardized measurement units and the Chinese script, which made it a lot easier for people across China to communicate. And then, as we mentioned before, one of the most famous things he was known for was like completing the construction of Great Wall. The Great Wall actually stretches over 21,000 kilometers. The exact number is 21,196. So to give you an idea, if you were to travel from the beginning to the end on a plane, that would take you almost the entire day. So obviously, being such a big project, it took a really long time to complete. The construction really started way back in 7th century BC, but it was Qin Shi Huang who managed to finish the structure that is still there today. So one of the main reasons he built it was that he wanted to make sure that his empire was safe from invaders. He was worried that people from outside of China might come and try to take over, so he decided a wall was the best way to keep them out. He took a bunch of smaller walls that had already been built, and he connected them together into one gigantic structure. And as you can probably imagine, building the wall was not an easy project. It took over 1 million workers, and a lot of them actually unfortunately died during the construction process. So some were killed by accidents, like falling off the wall or being crushed by falling rocks. Others died from diseases that were spreading through the crowded work camps. And it was rumored that some of these dead workers were also built into the Great Wall, but I don't know if that's true. Okay, so pretty hectic what was happening there in China. Meanwhile, a very different story was happening here in Australia. So we're talking about the Qin dynasty and Qin Shi Huang, and that was about 2,000 years ago. And around this time, Australia was still occupied by indigenous peoples, and their way of living was they lived as hunter gatherers, which meant that they foraged food, they hunted, and they had relatively small communities, and that's how they survived. So this picture is a site that archaeologists found, which what it shows is some ancient banana farms that were once managed by indigenous peoples, which this site is believed to be over 2,000 years old. So very different to the Great Wall and what was happening in China, but interesting to see what was happening at the same time. Okay. Now, does everyone have a worksheet that I handed out? Oh, you don't have one, Amy? Okay, here you go. So we're just gonna read together as a class. I'm gonna get one person to read out each paragraph. Okay, can somebody start us off by reading the first paragraph? Dylan?
Qin Shi Huang, born in 259 BC, was the first emperor of China. He was born into the Qin state, which was located in what is now known as the Shanxi province in China. Qin's family was not of noble birth, but he eventually rose to power and became one of the most influential figures in Chinese history.
Okay, great. Tim?
Qin Shi Huang is best known for unifying China. He achieved this through a few different ways, including standardizing units of currency, weights, and other measurements throughout the country, finishing the construction of the Great Wall, and creating a standard national system of writing that made communication much easier. This was called the Qin script.